In this second tutorial, we're going to explore a little deeper some of the menus and some of the options available to you with the calculator for doing calculations. Now, I'm going to start by opening up a document that's in my IM1 folder. So I'm going to go through my documents, and notice there's my IM1 folder I created in the last video and the document IM1 Basics, and it's highlighted, so if I hit enter it opens it right up and I'm right back to where I left off. Well, you can enter numbers and do basic calculations as we've gone through, but there are all sorts of other things that you can do, and there are all sorts of notation that's available to you on the calculator. The menu button will give you all sorts of things. Depending upon which calculator you have, this menu might look a little different, but you should feel free to explore the different things under the menu button. A really important button is the escape button, which always gets you back to the home screen, like right now, or not the home screen, but ignores a command you might have given. So I hit the escape button and it brings me back to my calculator page. We have the document menu, which we went through to save our document, and there are all sorts of things available to you here. Again, I encourage you to kind of explore through the menu. I escape back out. You can also use the control button to access other menus and things on the page. So anything in blue above your buttons can be accessed using the control button. If I hit control menu, I get a whole different menu. There's different things in here, and yes, you can copy and paste in this calculator, all sorts of things. Very much, again, it's a document-based calculator. So I'm going to escape back out of there. There are all sorts of things available to you down the left-hand side of the calculator. Things like if I want to square 8, there is a simple squared button, and then I hit enter to evaluate it. The other way, now that's just squared. What if I wanted to cube it? Oh boy. Well, I could take 8, and if I use what's called the caret, it gives me the uppercase, and so now I can put a 3 in and get 8 cubed. You could just as easily get 8 squared that way, but because the squaring function is something that's used so often, it's given its separate button. So there are all sorts of things here. Notice the trig button. These things may or may not mean anything to you, but that one opens up a whole menu of commands, and notice it has a little arrow under the trig. There is actually an equals button, and that's normally only used under certain conditions, and we're not going to get into that right now. So you want to continue to use your enter button to evaluate an expression that's on any given line. Notice also that the control button allows you to access square root above the x squared key, and I can put in a value and evaluate that. Notice again, it's giving me the exact value. If I wanted an approximation, I would again hit control and enter, and it gives me the decimal approximation. So there are lots of things over here, and you can explore those. Farther down, notice that this button, which has pi on it, has a little arrow, and it opens up, and there are various other mathematical constants and concepts available to you. But this is where you can use pi, and it will use it to as many decimal places as the calculator can handle internally. Rather than, we don't use 3.14, we use this value. So if I multiply that times 2 and hit enter, notice that it gives me 2 pi because it's in exact mode. And so again, I can approximate what that value is by using control enter. Moving on, there are going to be various times when you're going to want to add a new page. Right now we have a document with a single page open for a calculator page, and you can add as many pages as you want to a given document. And some people like to put different problems on different pages. It really depends on what you're working on. but you need to understand the functionality of the calculator. So let's add another page, and notice that above the document menu button, there's a plus page in blue. So if I hit Control and the document button, I can add a second page, and it gives me the options for that page. Right now, we're just going to add a second calculator page. Really exciting. So there it is. Notice that the tab at the top now says 1.2. Well, that's second page in problem 1. We can look at, you can also create other problems. It gets pretty deep, but for now we'll leave it with just problem 1. So we've got 2 pages, and you can get back and forth between those pages either by scrolling up and touching the tab using your touchpad, or you can use the buttons. If I hit Control and left arrow, it moves me 1 page to the left. Control right arrow moves me 1 page to the right. You notice the blue next to those. Now, the top and the bottom are really important. If I hit Control up arrow, it gives me a view where I see all the pages that are in problem 1. Remember, we said there were 2. There was the one we were working on and the one we just added. This is where you can delete pages, you can copy pages. Right now I'm going to delete it just so you can see what's going on. Notice that the page 2 is highlighted in blue. I can change that by using the arrow key, so you can highlight any page you want. And I'm going to hit the delete key, and notice we're back to 1 page. Well, how do I view that? Control down arrow takes me back to page view. So I'm going to now create a second page, and I'm going to create a page I can graph things on. That's number 2. So you can either punch the number 2 or arrow down and hit enter. There are a number of different ways to do it. But here's a graphing page, and it's all set up to accept an equation. Say 2x plus 1. I hit enter, and it gives me a graph of that equation, and in functional notation, it labels it. Okay? So that's the basics of how you can enter equations and graph them. You might notice right now that you don't have the entry bar there. How are you going to enter a second equation? Because you can graph multiple equations on here. Well, here's a quick trick. There's various menus to get there, but here's my suggestion. If you remember Control G takes you in and out of the entry line. If I hit Control G again, it goes away. So it's just toggling. So you can think about it as Control Graph, and I'm back, and notice it says F2, so it's ready for a second equation. Now here's an important point. I want to put in a negative slope, say -3. Well, you normally don't use the subtraction button. You use this button down here to indicate a negative value. So if I put in a -3x, oh, why not plus 2, and hit enter, okay, there's my second function. So you can graph all sorts of stuff. And here's where additional pages can be really helpful, because if this gets kind of busy and there's too many things on it, rather than going in and deleting them all you have to do is create a new page, make it a graphing page, and notice there's nothing on it. Now it's starting with F3. The calculator hasn't forgotten about those equations you put in, but you can continue on here graphing other equations without getting rid of the older stuff you did. And remember, we can go back and look. There it is. So this multiple page option in this document-based calculator can be really valuable. that's it for now. But before I wrap this up, I want to make sure I save my document. And I can do that through the document menu, or also on the left side towards the top, above the little calculator key, you'll see Save in blue. Now, if you notice, the name of this file has an asterisk before the name at the top. That means that it's a file that contains info that has yet to be saved. It's an indicator it needs to be saved. So I'm going to use my Control button, the Calculator button, and hit Save. And notice the asterisk goes away, and I know the document's been saved. Because it was already a named document, it didn't ask me for a name. I didn't have to go through Save As or anything like that. So that takes care of things for today. And in the next tutorial, we'll do a little bit more work on the graphing page.